Correct. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Manchester Middle East Centre's online webinar on strategy in uncertain times, the pandemic, by Professor Kevin Jagiello. I first and foremost would like to introduce Professor Kevin, as he's a school alumni from the 1970s. After several years as a strategy consultant, Kevin joined the school's faculty in 1984 in the area of strategic management. For over 35 years, Kevin has advised and consulted to companies and delivered executive and student education in strategic management for the school and his own firm. Kevin delivers the school's advanced strategic management course, the Capstone, which brings it all together with a senior executive mindset. The course is structured around 5 pillars, which all need to come together for effective strategic management, analyzing the external environment, company strategy, business strategy, innovation and new business models, and implementation. So thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, Professor Kevin Jagiello, and I'll pass over to you then.
Thank you, William, and thank you to the Dubai staff for inviting me for the session. I've got on my screen a little icon saying start broadcast. So I'll press that, and now I can see myself, but I can't see my slides just as well. I know what's on the slides. Yes, so welcome all, especially to our alumni and current students, but the purpose of the seminar is primarily to interest new students to sign up to do the MBA. You've all seen the agenda we're going to go through. I'm going to hopefully be able to click my screen and move through. Yes, I'm going to go through each of the elements. We've got 33 slides, a lot to cover in a short space of time. As always, I put on lots of words on the slides, so if you look at the webinar after the event, it saves you taking notes. The words are there to tell a story. Even though it's a short period of time, I do want to finish with some Q&A. So as we go through, if you've got any Q&A, please take a note or fire those, and William will be handling that at the end of the session. An hour. With ASM, we currently run with 3 or 5 day workshops. Wish we had 5 days. So, as we know, all good alumni and current students, you should be reading the Financial Times every morning, the Economist, Harvard Business Review, but importantly, looking at the McKinsey and Boston Consultancy Group websites. If we want to keep up with what's happening in the world in this pandemic, they're your must-reads to keep informed. And the first bullet, I've just taken some words out of those publications, what they're actually saying about this. This is, as we all know, unprecedented. It's a word I'll use several times, but you have to customize that to your own situation. There's no generalities about this. One size does not fit all. This pandemic is affecting different countries, different regions in different ways, different sectors. I mean, if we're in the aviation business, my goodness gracious me, Rolls-Royce just announced 9,000 redundancies this morning. So it will impact companies and businesses in very different ways, and it's impacting us as individuals, as families, with our loved ones, again, in very different ways. So always customize the implications of the pandemic to your situation. Got my clicker now. As William said, ASM, it splits into 5 mindsets, the 5 pillars. And those 5 mindsets need to come together for effective strategic management. I've just taken a few concepts, one concept from the external environment, scenarios, because we face a lot of uncertainty. And I'm going to use 2 other concepts which bring these 5 mindsets, these 5 pillars together as we go through the seminar. And whether you're at the start of the pandemic, opening up, or building for a new future, those 5 mindsets need to come together continuously. We've all seen the ladies before. For many of us, this is a very ugly lady at this moment in time. But we always have to see that pretty lady and build towards that pretty lady. So, have optimism, a silver lining, and there must be a way out of this for us, whether as individuals, as businesses, companies moving forward. This comes from Courtney from McKinsey, a classic article from the year 2000, and it addresses uncertainty, which is the 10th of our topics when we look at the external environment in ASM, the course Advanced Strategic Management. When the pandemic hit, we were certainly in uncertainty level 4. Anybody's guess. We really didn't know what was happening. Nobody could predict or forecast whether this would spread, contaminate the whole planet, what the death rates were. But thankfully, ambiguity and uncertainty level 4 doesn't last for too long. We move into uncertainty level 3, which we're in at the moment. A range of possible outcomes. We have an optimistic view, a pessimistic view, but while there's still great uncertainty around it, we're narrowing down, and there we desperately need scenarios to look at the upside, to look at the downside. What are the implications as we develop our strategy to have it robust to different scenario outcomes? Eventually, we hope to return to level 1 uncertainty, the new normal, whenever that may be. It may be several years in the future. So let me stress, it's still very uncertain. We need to maintain resilience, agility in the way we approach this. As you know, I'm a little bit older. I've seen lots of pandemics, but this one is something different. There's over 5 million reported cases in 190 countries, so this is definitely global. And unfortunately, there's over 300,000 deaths, and the totals are rising. And as we all know, those statistics underreport the reality. The true numbers are going to be far higher. Now, if you compare that against the severe pandemics we've had in recent times, it's just unprecedented. Ebola in West Africa at the peak was claiming 11,500 lives. All of the other pandemics we talk about, typically less than 1,000 lives. So this only compares to seasonal influenza and things like HIV/AIDS. But this is quite different to things like HIV/AIDS, because if governments did nothing about this, then this would have just infected populations and the death rates would have been astronomical. The base scenario for the UK was 50 million deaths, but within that there was, sorry, I should have said 500,000 deaths, not 50 million. But within that, there was a much higher total, which went into the millions, and a much lower total. So really, governments were left with no choice but to lock down economies to try and eradicate or at least flatten this infection. But in doing that and protecting healthcare systems, unfortunately, the economic consequences have been enormous for most of us. So it's protecting life, but the destruction of wealth has been extreme, to say the least. Now, I've gone through many recessions. We've only had 4 global recessions since the Second World War. The first one was 73-75 when I was a student at Manchester University. And that was caused primarily by the oil price shock, the oil price embargo, where oil prices went up fourfold in a short period of time, and that caused dire consequences for the world around us. Then the next recessions, the late 80s, or sorry, the early 80s. By then I was a strategy consultant, and I can assure you it's not pleasant. It's closures, redundancies, bankruptcies. And then we had the next one in the 90s. But then the Great Recession came, the financial meltdown of 2008 and 2009. But look at the figures. Globally, GDP only declined by 1%. And that was primarily North America and Europe that took the hit. Other regions in Asia Pacific and China were not really affected by that Great Recession. But look at what's already happening with the pandemic. You know, Europe is taking a GDP hit of 7.4%, and it's going to be a lot worse. So again, unprecedented. We've not seen this before. If we go to America, unfortunately, the real jobless employment rate is already at 22%, and Goldman Sachs are predicting a peak of 35%. Even though there's great uncertainty, those numbers are going to grow. Now, if you go back to the 30s, the Great Recession, which really hit America hard, unemployment was less than 25%. So this is very different. We haven't got a playbook really to handle this. Given that shock to the system, what have governments been doing? They've been providing stimulus and support to keep the lights on in the economy. And the numbers are huge. If we look at France and the UK, over 25% of GDP. In America, 15% and growing. And the Democrats are, lobbying for far more support far quicker. Unfortunately, many countries simply haven't got the war chest to do that stimulus. But a silver lining, without that war chest, the countries will not have the debt mountains that other countries will have to live with for decades to come after this pandemic is over. So again, unprecedented. Now, this one size fits all, it's hitting us in different ways. There's clearly some major beneficiaries from the pandemic. Medical equipment suppliers. My eldest daughter is a doctor, works in a hospital on 12 and a half, 13-hour shifts on the front line. They've been short of PPE to protect them. And now that has come through and they've got all of that. But there's been a tremendous boom. And anybody involved with COVID-19 from the pharmaceutical sector has seen an explosion in demand, an explosion in government grants. But the biggest beneficiaries have been the digital online. When I was a consultant in the last recession, 80-82, the PC hadn't been invented. We didn't have the internet. Just think about how much we rely on digital communications today. And home working, which many of us have been doing, and obviously we've been buying online, paying online, having deliveries from online, and Netflix, online entertainment, and telehealth. You cannot get to see the doctor, but one doctor in China, we can phone up, we digitally talk to a doctor. So those type of sectors have absolutely boomed and will continue to boom going forward. They're of no interest to me for this masterclass. I want to concentrate on the other side, which have been disproportionately impacted. Travel and tourism has just come to a halt. Hospitality sectors, the restaurants, crowd entertainment. There's no more Manchester United playing football. Discretionary retail has been closed down. And obviously we're concerned about education. Just think about the scale of this. 191 countries have closed schools. That's more than 1.6 billion children not attending education. And they're in lockdown in many countries. We're in lockdown. You know, the dynamics of family life have changed considerably. And real estate has come under tremendous pressure. One of my clients is a large provider of office space to companies in the north of the country. All of a sudden, those offices are totally deserted, they're empty. And that's had a major knock-on effect, as we know. Oil prices collapsing. I didn't think I'd ever see the day. In America, they were paying you to take the oil off their hands. Yes, oil prices have bounced back, but they're still nowhere close to sustainable levels to support the economies, say, in the Middle East. And as I mentioned, Rolls-Royce, 9,000 redundancies today. You know, making engines for planes, maintaining those engines, there's no business out there. Automotive, Renault have announced probably closing 3 factories. That's not just temporarily, that is for all time. You know, car purchases in the UK down 97% last month compared to the previous month last year. CapEx budgets have just gone on freeze into a coma, so capital goods. And we all look at what's happening to the textile industry around the world. You know, closed factories in Bangladesh, cotton mountains in India. So these have been so severe as we lock down an economy. These things don't just become difficult, they disappear. Now think about the implications for your countries. Dubai, the first time I went to was 1981, and it was a fishing village, very little there. And now we go to Dubai and we marvel at Dubai. They build it and they will come. But look at the areas disproportionately impacted. You know, Emirates grounded, cargo at the port, trade has collapsed. And obviously, Dubai, as a trading hub for the world, relies on that cargo, passengers, tourism, and you know, the big events like Expo 2020 are now deferred to 2021. And there's a shopping destination, discretionary retail. You know, this is hitting Dubai tremendously hard as a shock. And think about KSA, Saudi Arabia. That oil price is just not sustainable for the economy. And the reserves for KSA in the last month declining by the largest total on record. And they've had to introduce austerity. You know, payments to state workers, 1.5 million, the living allowance, that's going to be cancelled next month. The following month, VAT trebled from 5 to 15%. You know, these are difficult times for governments, for industries, for people. We've not seen anything like it before. So let me introduce you to the first of the concepts to put things together. It's a concept to audit your starting position, space, strategic position and action evaluation. I use it with many of the clients I talk to assess their standing in a business. And here's the diagram. You can look it up on Google. There's many articles on it. And there's 4 axes. Your first axis is industry attractiveness. How good is the game you are playing? At 6, this is a wonderful game. The market is booming. Everybody's making profitability. At 1, unfortunately, it's a disaster. Your second big question in strategy is how good a player are you of that game? And at -1, you are fantastic. You dominate the market, you've got strong brand, good quality, customers are queuing up to buy your products, you've got fantastic technology, good people, skills, productivity. Other competitors cannot compete against you. So your two big questions: how good is the game? How good a player are you? But we always have to think about the wider environment and how that supports our markets, our industries, and how it affects our ability to operate. Finally, we come to the financials. Now, what is our pretty lady of strategic management, which we all work to? This chart. We're a good player in a good game, supported by the wider environment, making a lot of money. That's what dreams are made of and what we look for. But even as a good competitor, take somebody like Emirates, and I love flying Emirates. They're a class act, they're a good competitor. So they've got international advantage on the long haul as far as I'm concerned. But what has just happened to their business? The market's disappeared. There's nothing there. That pandemic has crucified them. So while they're still a very good player, they're bleeding to death financially. Now, what do you have to do in that situation? And it's not necessarily pleasant, but you have to do it. You have to survive, somehow keep the lights on, buy time, get that pressure off your back. And at the same time, as you're trying to keep the lights on, you've got to actually try and protect the resource and capability you need for any recovery whenever that comes. So you run to the markets, to the investors, to the government, to the banks, wherever you can to get some cash in. You extend your payables, you try and collect your receivables, but you have to have empathy. Your suppliers and customers are facing dire consequences as well. You negotiate and renegotiate your terms, like many people have done with my client that's an office provider. There's rent holidays. You have to postpone capital expenditure, and unfortunately, you reduce operational costs. The discretionary costs are killed, and unfortunately, headcount has to go, and pay cuts, pay freezes for those who remain. Anything you've got that you don't need for your future prosperity is a fire sale. You have to monitor that cash position on a daily basis, rolling basis. We need to survive. Yeah, it is hard, but it has to be done to provide some sort of resilience for those that are left if and when the recovery comes. Now, let's take a slightly different situation. I'm an average competitor. I'm still able to do a little bit of business. The pandemic is affecting me tremendously, but I'm still doing a little bit of business. Your financials are coming under pressure, and they'll get worse until we recover and move out of this. So again, managing cash remains the oxygen. Now, I've taken an average competitor. If you start to slide to the 5 and 6, i.e. you're a weak competitor, you have got major problems. This is a bankruptcy liquidation awaiting you, unless you can engineer a major turnaround going forward. Well, let's have a look at the horizons. This comes from McKinsey, but I've changed the labeling to reflect the importance of government throughout the horizons. Governments have had to, in Horizon 1, take these drastic measures. They're trying to eradicate or flatten the virus. Horizon 2, which some of us are in now, is a gradual reopening of the economy, hopefully with effective test, trace, track technology and safeguarding livelihoods. Eventually, we'll get to a new normal. We don't know when that will be. We don't know what it will look like. There's a lot of uncertainty, but hopefully we'll have highly effective treatments and hopefully we'll have a vaccine. Now, in terms of strategy, you have to have a strategy for Horizon 1. You know, you cannot avoid Horizon 1, and that is reality today. And if you don't handle Horizon 1, there's no point thinking about Horizons 2 and 3, you won't have a future. But on the assumption you can handle Horizon 1, you have to start to prepare for Horizons 2 and 3 within your strategies going forward. But given that there's great uncertainty, you need scenario thinking in your approaches to Horizons 2 and 3 going forward. Those of you who know me knew that I'd put this chart up. This is the chart I think you need to help your thought process in Horizons 1, 2, and 3. We have company strategies, business strategies that combine the other strategies we look at, but now we need an organizational structure, a design that makes it easy for people to focus on that strategy, the drivers of competitive success. We have thousands of systems to monitor, to control, to influence behavior, but key systems like OKRs, objective key results, they're critical at this moment in time, so the leadership can concentrate on priorities and decentralize to the front line so they can be agile and flexible, responding to the challenges faced and the strategy they're trying to implement. As you know, it all comes down to people. We need to align our people with our game plan, engage those people individually, collectively within teams, and we have to have the skills, the capabilities to underpin our strategies, otherwise they just won't come to fruition. And the way we behave, our culture, our style, how we actually get things done, all of the S's have to work together, but I think today that central S is critically important. Your vision of the future, your mission, the purpose of the company, the objectives, but importantly, leadership and management to drive the organization forward through the horizons moving forward. You know, the masterclass could be just on this one chart. In fact, we could have 5 days on this one chart. Your challenge is to manage and integrate those S's for today, but also prepare those S's to build for the future. But as I keep saying, there's a lot of uncertainty around, and none of us can predict. With uncertainty, you have to use scenario analysis. Now, McKinsey, who I mentioned right at the beginning, must read a COVID-19 briefing note, and they've got many, many insights on the pandemic. They paint a picture of 9 scenarios moving forward. And this comes from that publication, and they're really looking at how effective is the government response in handling the pandemic at the bottom. Is the government effective or very ineffective? And what about the pandemic and how quickly it spreads? What's the healthcare response? We handle that pandemic very well. There's very few infections. Economies start to open up again, like New Zealand, to a certain extent China, or there's a broad failure. As they survey executives around the world, the black is the more optimistic scenarios, and that's where the majority of executives are seeing the future. But you have to take all the scenarios, whether it's a V-shaped, U-shaped, whether it's an L-shaped and we don't get out of this, whether it's a W, we get out of it, but then fall back with a reoccurrence. And the numbers from the McKinsey survey, you know, 59% are in those black boxes. That's 60% of executives are reasonably optimistic for horizons 2 and 3. coming out of this. But it depends on which country, it depends on which industry we're in. If we go to China, far more optimism. The A2 and A4, 12%. In China, they're 28%. So they're a lot more bullish that they're going to pull through this. But you have to develop your own scenarios for your own business, in your own industries, in your countries. And the scenarios for our global businesses will be different in different countries. And always take those scenarios to test your strategies going forward. None of us can predict which scenario will play out. A war room. In Horizon 1, and many of us have experienced this, we formed a nerve center, a cockpit, a crisis room, and many of us were in those meetings every morning, every evening, handling the fallout, working 7 days a week. That war room was critical and still is critical. A cross-section of your people that cover all the stakeholder touch points. And the companies I work with typically split it into then an operations team to manage today. And that team typically split into a market-facing team and an internal operations team. But then importantly, a separate team, a plan-ahead team. You know, it's very difficult to plan ahead and manage at the same time, so split it. And where many I know of the alums were involved in SWAT teams, you know, for the critical issues, let's put a task force together very quickly to handle this. So there had to be a reorganization in our 7S structure to handle this in the short term. And what do we rely on? Good information, granular information in real time, so we can judge our progress, make those incremental adjustments on a daily basis. And importantly, a communications team. You know, there's so much anxiety, uncertainty. We need to communicate with our staff, with our suppliers, with our customers, with all of our stakeholders. Communication is the lifeblood of bringing everybody together to handle this. And the centre and senior management cannot do everything, so centralise around the key priorities, decentralise to the line so they can be fast, fluid, flexible, adaptive, reactive to the daily things as they occur. So the 7S's again, hopefully your war room, cockpits, whatever you call them, covers all of the bases. You have to manage all of those stakeholders and integrate your strategies moving forward, being mindful of keeping those stakeholders aligned. Now, with everything going on, there's too much for us to handle as individuals, as human beings, as organizations. So we have to prioritize. Do the important things. The rest doesn't matter. But do the important things in Horizon 1, which are easy to do. You know, the benefit effort. You know, the Pareto's law, the 80-20 rules, the rules of three. I have to do this, I can hold this, I won't do this. But importantly, the things we have to do for today, the things we have to do for tomorrow. We cannot do everything, prioritize. And typically a war room has a portfolio of initiatives. You know, these are the 15 things we're going to do, and let's review them on a daily basis. How are we doing against our initiatives? But you can cascade a portfolio of initiatives. I'm a team at the front line. As a team, we've got 5 initiatives. Here's our OKRs. How are we doing against our OKRs as a management process? So this loose tight. The centre on the big priorities, centering policies, but decentralising to the front line to handle the day-to-day. Many of us have got many businesses, so we need a portfolio. We do a space chart for each of our businesses, but then we collapse those space charts on a portfolio chart like the General Electric's traffic lights. It's very easy to do. Collapse or consolidate your industry attractiveness environmental stability score into one, and that's industry attractiveness. Your competitive advantage and financial strength score into one, and that is your business strength. Now, perhaps somewhere in your portfolio, you've got still good businesses. They can provide you with some cash to support other areas. If everything is in that bottom right, then we really are in that manage for cash situation. But even on a business level, even if you've got one business, use this portfolio chart. What does your customer portfolio look like? What are the prospects of that customer portfolio moving forward? What does your product portfolio look like? Which products still might be able to be sold? Can you change the appeal of some of your services? Can you relocate? Can you redeploy in some way? So what about your distribution channels? Which channels, perhaps digital booming, doing well? How can we redeploy to our channel strategy? So use the portfolio charts, both at a company level, but drill down and use those portfolio charts at a business level. And importantly, with your team one that is managing today and team two, which is looking to the future, have those portfolio charts for horizon 1, 2, and 3, hopefully long term. This is Osterwalder, the business model canvas. And it's a lovely book, came out in 2010. I use it in advanced strategic management. This is not the time for detailed planning. This is the time for standing back, looking at your basic blocks of the business. The first block you always think about is your customers. Their needs, their attitudes, their behaviors, the customer journey, the job they're trying to be doing, their pains, their gains. Base one is understanding your customers. Base two is your value proposition. How are you going to satisfy those customers so they want to do business with you in these difficult times, rather than go to competitors? Then you get into your marketing course and say, how are we going to manage our promotional mix to manage relationships with those customers? What's our channel strategy, our go-to-market strategy? Those blocks manage or result in our revenue stream. But then we look at our cost side of the equation. What are our key resources, our key activities and processes, and who are the key partners we work with? They have to be there to fit with the value proposition so we can deliver. In these difficult times, I think you need to look at all of those 9 blocks and what are the implications of those blocks. Can you make them work together effectively? A strategy only comes together if they are working together effectively. And always look for the pretty lady. What are the opportunities? They may not be obvious. Can I reimagine, reformulate those blocks in some way to generate some business? Or what would be a new business model that I need to move to? The powerful greenfield site thinking, clean slate. If I started again, what would a business model look like that would make me commercially viable? Now, can you move towards that commercially viable new business model? And the key questions, which I always link to space, when you're looking at a business model, always go for granularity. What are the more attractive customer areas, geographic areas, channels to focus in on? We're not passive observers. Can we can we improve the attractiveness of the market? And difficult as these trends are, can we make these trends work for us in some sort of way? But importantly, we have to try and protect and strengthen our competitive advantage moving forward. And we have to come back to finance. So what is your space position today? Your audit, what are you targeting, and be sensitive to those scenarios moving forward within your strategies. And handling the scenarios, I know it's difficult. You've got several scenarios. Stress test your strategies. Is it robust for different scenarios? Because we really don't know which will eventually come out. And if they're robust, that's great. Go for no regret moves that will work, whether it's this scenario or that. And again, as I've said, we're not passive observers. Can we improve the game we're playing? But I mentioned before, now's a time for agility, resilience, flexibility. We cannot get locked down in tablets of stone. So we have to have that ability to move forward and incrementally shape our 7S's, how they have to change for us to keep our strategies in place. And, if we've got a bit of resource, we've got some options and hedging strategy. Now, if you are going to put all your eggs in one basket and go with one view of the future, you're taking a huge bet. If you're forced to take that bet, my strong advice would be have a contingency strategy in place. If that bet goes wrong, what will be your fallback position? And preparing for the future horizons, this is really our subject for in advanced strategic management, where we have the tagline of curiosity, imagination, creativity. It's Plato, necessity is the mother of invention. It is rather surprising when we go back in history, many of our great companies today at one time nearly went bankrupt. And as they solved that problem, that laid the foundations for generations of great performance going forward. So in a way, it's a wonderful time. It forces us to stand back, to look at the logic of our company, our businesses, our 7S's. Let's get things on a level plane, as difficult as those decisions may be. So we need to address what I call the 3Rs. The restore, the rebuild, the recreate, the company, the business model going forward. And again, I commend those 7S's and how they'll need to be put in place to manage for today and manage for the future. And with frequent updating, without uncertainty. And I've mentioned it a few times, but it's all about resilience and agility now. It's not about cost optimization and doing things fantastically well. We have to have that flexibility. Even if the cost side of the equation goes up, we need that buffer, that fallback position. Horizon 3, the new normal, and I'm coming close to the end, and I'm pleased because I wanted to leave about 15 minutes for the Q&A. We don't know how long Horizon 2 will be, how effective it will be. There could be mutations of the pandemic, there could be new pandemics hit us, there could be other shocks, there could be reoccurrence, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Syngenta, one of the UK companies, is testing inhaled interferon beta at this moment in time. They're testing it in hospitals, shortly be testing it in care homes and within the general public. Their results are due in June. And I'm very hopeful. They were developing the inhaled interferon for COVID, people with bronchitis, asthma, things like that. So it's a very well developed, well sort of tested, safe thing. And that's being used in Cuba. It's good reports in China. So there is hope. We'll find something shortly to alleviate the worst things. And just a couple of days ago, we had, and there's hundreds and thousands of clinical trials around the world. They all have promise for bringing a vaccine to market. But unfortunately, it's going to be probably a long lead time. The experts are saying 12 months, 18 months, even then they're saying we may never find a vaccine. We hope and pray we do, because we need it to restore normality. Now, in the future, some things will revert to history, but other things will be very different to they are today. As you know, customer needs, attitudes, and behaviours have changed dramatically during lockdowns. That creates opportunity, and it also creates threat. Go back to the megatrends, the ninth of our topics, when we look at the external environment. There's going to be a continued advance of digital and the contactless economy. How we work, how we purchase. I think those trends are now accelerating and will continue to accelerate. The big things around us, automation, robotics, 3D. I think 3D and the impact on supply chains, the world was one global supply chain. With resilience, a lot of firms are now saying, hey, let's localize, let's have quicker response, let's have more robust supply chains. And 3D will be a major contributor to some of the new ways we'll do things. As we know, Nike, Adidas, you customize your own pair of Nikes and they're manufactured and delivered to you the next day. AI, virtual reality, all of these things, a tsunami of megatrends will be changing the way we behave. Go back, I mentioned in 1980, as a recession, we didn't have PCs or the internet. Just think what this will be doing to the future as these technologies come into the market, and what will be the implications of the new normal. And importantly, we'll have to work differently, and we'll have to develop our new skill sets, continuous learning. And this is my plug to any of you thinking about doing a Manchester MBA. The MBA gives you a new skill set to be able to drill down into any one of those S's in great detail, and then stand back. How can I get those 7 S's working together effectively? So just a quick overview. This is, for the last time, unprecedented. It's a discontinuity, which I have never seen. Great uncertainty remains, but now is the time for leadership. Leadership at many levels in the organisation. And I've mentioned it a couple of times, OKRs. It's a management process like many others that can be effective, can be ineffective. If you're interested, go onto the internet, type Google OKRs, and you can listen to an hour, 10-minute talk about how they use OKRs. The beauty of that is it cascades in the organisation if done well, and we have a community of leaders within the company moving forward, and we need leadership with our stakeholders as well. We're all in this together. And the imperatives, as always, we have to manage for today. If we don't manage for today, we haven't got a tomorrow. But we also have to prepare for that future with great empathy. Always put yourself in other people's shoes, whether it's other staff that work with you who have got anxiety, your customers, your suppliers, other people in the community. Roosevelt, as you know, keep your feet on the ground, execute for today, but keep your eyes on the stars, that horizon 3 we're moving towards. And follow, it's always darkest before the dawn. So for those of you who it's a very ugly lady at this moment in time, always look for that pretty lady, the silver lining that may come. And as you know, I'm a Manchester United supporter. When you go and watch the team and the team are not playing well, and they haven't played well for a long time, a song sometimes comes out of Old Trafford. You're losing 3-0 at home to a horrible team you should have thrashed, and we start singing the Monty Python song. Always look on the bright side of life. So Q&A, unfortunately only about 10 minutes left, but hopefully you got something out of that. William, have any questions come in?
Absolutely, and thank you very much, Kevin, for that presentation. That was very, very insightful, and I'm sure that many of our attendees have enjoyed the session. We do have several questions that I've just pulled up here. If we just start with the first one, Basil is asking if the pandemic will permanently shift the supply chain towards domestic suppliers, imbalance between costs and reliability of supply.
Yeah, I think the clients I'm talking to, that's one of the key things they're talking about. You always have to look at the cost involved. Yeah, I can get it from China and I may get it at 20% lower cost. But to take it from China, deliver it to the UK, I've got the logistical costs, I've got a lot of time, the closed borders. Certainly the people I'm talking to are tending to favour moving to localised supply chains, even if they are much higher cost. And as I mentioned, 3D will revolutionize this for a lot of us. As we know, lots of the clients in the UK and around the world are really ramping up 3D. What that can do is absolutely incredible. We're building massive components for engines with 3D. We're building wings for aeroplanes with 3D. So I do think, the world, unfortunately, in the new normal, trade has collapsed. And, some implications of what could happen, protectionism, nationalism, political problems. I think people are now looking at managing their risk and resilience, agility being far more important than the cost side of the equation. But every company needs to make sense of this in their own way, weigh the pros and cons. But I do see a major shift. McKinsey themselves have said, trade in hard goods has been declining for rather a long time. Countries are becoming more self-sufficient. What is traveling is information and technology. So I do see supply chains becoming much more regionalized, much more localized for many.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you very much for that answer, Professor Kevin. We have another one here from Bradley asking, do you think the economic impact on Dubai is higher as they have not really recovered in many sectors from the 2008-9 crisis?
Yeah, Bradley, nice to hear from you again. And as I said, it would be nice to be meeting in person and having a beer talking about this. I mean, Dubai faces a perfect tsunami. As you go through the areas badly affected, Emirates, tourism, real estate, 75% of the debt of Dubai is tied to airlines, real estate, really, and they're getting hammered. And so, Dubai didn't recover fully, and I'm sure Dubai is talking to Abu Dhabi at this moment in time. The stimulus Sheikh Mohammed has given, he hasn't given a great stimulus because he hasn't got the money. He's doing what he can, the one nation approach, do what you can. But Dubai, it's a tsunami that's going to hit, and it's going to be, I think, unfortunately for Dubai, far more difficult than the financial meltdown. Unless miracles appear and we have a vaccine tomorrow. Sorry not to be too optimistic for Dubai. But one of the great advantages Dubai has got, obviously it's got all of the infrastructure in place, it's got a fantastic legacy to build on. So the expatriates, they all disappear because there's nothing there to do. But as things start to return to a new normal, look at the fantastic infrastructure Dubai has got to offer, not only Dubai, but the rest of the world as a hub between North and South, East and West, and it's all there. But it will be a difficult Horizon 1, a difficult Horizon 2, and hopefully they're shorter, but Abu Dhabi, I think, is a key player, and I'm sure Dubai and Abu Dhabi are talking together about some type of not only financial bailouts, but some potential consolidations. I mean, Etihad, a great airline, pity they're sponsoring a poor football team like Manchester City. But, should Emirates and Etihad be working together? There's a lot of duplication between the Emirates. Perhaps this provides an opportunity for the Emirates to come together in some way, much more as a common market to address the pandemic and the implications. So, Bradley, sorry not to be optimistic, but you cannot really design things to hit a country far worse than what we're experiencing in this moment. Hopefully I'm able to come back to Dubai and have a beer with you face to face shortly.
We'd be happy to. We'd be happy to, Professor Kevin. We just have another from Martin Hughes here. He says, good morning, it's nice to see you again. He would like to know, when is ASM most beneficial in the downturn, on the upswing or on the plateau?
Yeah, Martin, nice to hear from you again. Martin was a student rep in Dubai and did a fantastic job for us, building the product, building the alumni network, things like that. Yeah, I think ASM helps us. It really doesn't matter what situation we're in. We have to understand the external environment. We need our company business strategies. We need innovation, new business models, and most importantly, we need to execute effectively. So it's appropriate at all times. But currently, in the 3-day and 5-day ASM, I am stressing innovation, new business models. Now, we need those to handle a pandemic and the downside. We need those to handle the upside. Given the stress on building, I would say probably ASM, if I had to choose one, it would be more appropriate to a company that has got some financial muscle. And all the research says it's almost impossible to grow year after year your top line revenue and your bottom line revenue consistently for a long period in time. Why too many companies just focus on today? Now, ASM currently says, yes, we have to manage for today, but it has a large stress on how we build for tomorrow, how we go to Horizon 2, how we go to Horizon 3. So, long-winded answer as always. I think it's always applicable, but it has got a skew towards the future, Horizons 2, Horizons 3.
Brilliant,
and that's
thank
what
you.
strategic management's about. It's about the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mohammed is asking, should the business define a business model for each horizon to better prospect for the future and longer survival?
Yeah, there's perhaps I should have made it clearer that you need a business model for today. And obviously with your different, your operations team, your go-to-market team, that is your business model. But then you've got your future team, which is saying, what do I need to do with that business model going forward? What's my portfolio of initiatives? How can I incrementally improve it? Or do I need to reimagine that business model and have something quite different for Horizons 2 and Horizons 3? Or perhaps now I've come to the time where I need to scrap this business model totally and recreate a new business model. So if you like, have a strategy for Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. What follows is a business model and your 7 S's for Horizon 1, a business model and your 7 S's for Horizon 2, a business model and the 7 S's for Horizon 3. And while we've got to hit today's business model, we've always got to be preparing for that future state, how we're going to prosper moving forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Professor Kevin. I think we'll take one more question. There are many. I apologize, we won't be able to go through all of them, but I will just go through one last one, if you don't mind, Kevin. If this is a question from Tam, if we have financial resources and time constraint, which S element among the 7 S's we should be prioritized?
Yeah, all 7, they work together. In truth, none of the S's are more important than the others, all 7. But the real answer is the 8th S. The 8th S is not published. I stress the 8th S in strategic management. And the 8th S is sequential management of the other 7 S's. So as soon as you want to make a change, it doesn't matter what it is, or what are the implications for each of the S's. Now, get the key levers you'll need to change, and that is your blueprint to move from your current S's to your future S's. So the most important S is sequential management of change. But if I was a company with lots of resource today, and it depends which industry, which sector, I would be looking very closely at acquisition. Some of yes, not all sectors, some sectors have boomed in terms of share price, but I look around at some shares and I've gone to cash. I've kept my medical shares, and I've actually bought 1 or 2 other medical shares for obvious reasons, but I'm largely in cash. But if I was a company with cash, I would be looking at some of the very attractive acquisitions I've got. But given the uncertainties we face, things could get a lot worse, and those valuations could come down significantly going forward. If you think about KSA and their wealth fund, they've taken big positions in Shell and things like Boeing, because they're saying these valuations, if we get to Horizon 3, are very attractive. A very brave view by the Saudi wealth fund. I think, we don't know, those valuations could get lower. So I'd be thinking money on the 8th S, sequential management of the other 7. But if I had a lot of resource, I would be thinking how to support my own operations, and perhaps now's the time to buy target acquisitions as well.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kevin, for answering all these questions. And once again, I do apologize. I'm just conscious of time. I don't want to keep Kevin too long on the line, and you as well. I'm sure that you're all very busy. But thank you very much, Kevin, again, for answering all these questions and for this brilliant presentation. Very, very insightful. And I'd like to thank all of you that have tuned in to listen to this webinar by Professor Kevin on strategy in uncertain times, the pandemic, brought to you by the University of Manchester Middle East Centre. Thank you very much to all of you, and we wish you a very pleasant evening. Stay safe and take care.
Yeah, and please do keep yourself safe and keep everybody else safe. Life is more important in this stage than livelihoods. Thank you very much, all.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. Have a very nice evening. Take care.
And thank you, William.